Angus here with Iron Bow Fly Shop. Today we're going to be tying up one of Andrew Grillos' El Caminos. I'm going to be doing this in a Skwala color today, as we're in that time of year now where we're starting to see squallas on top of the water and in the subsurface as well. So we're going to be using UTC 140 in olive today. I'm going to start our thread just behind the eye of the hook. And we're using a nymph hook today. This is a Daiichi 1260, just to help keel the fly a little bit when we're casting, and helps it sit just a little bit lower in the water column as well. Next we're going to be tying in our ice dub. Today we're going to be using olive brown. We're just going to grab a little chunk. We'll be tying in a small dubbing ball just to help splay the rubber legs we're going to be tying in next here. So I'm just going to get this onto my thread here. And if you tie in too much, you can always brush it out. Next, we're going to be tying in our MFC barred Sexi-Floss. We're going to be using olive today. So I'm just going to trim off about a 2-inch piece. I'm going to wrap it around our thread here. I'm just going to tie this down. Dubbing ball just kind of helps splay those legs out a little bit more. Next we're going to be tying in our piece of foam. Today we're going to be using Hareline thin fly foam, 2 mil in brown. And we want this just to be about width of our hook gap. So I'm just going to tie this in from about the midpoint of the shank. So now that we've got our foam tied in here, I'm going to come in here with a little bit of high-tack wax. Just going to lightly put some onto the thread here. Just helps this ice dub stick a little bit better. So I'm just going to grab a small piece, and if it's loosely on there, that's fine. We're going to create a little bit of a dubbing loop here. So I'm going to create my dubbing loop, close it off, bring our thread forward. Next I'm going to come in with my main dubbing twister and not drop it. Put that in the loop here, and we're going to give this a good spin. Doing this just helps the ice dub really absorb into that thread. Once we get to about the midpoint of our shank here, I'm going to close off our dubbing loop, trim off the excess, and we're going to bring this piece of foam back and we're going to tie this in. Couple tight wraps, make sure it's nice and secure, trim off the excess. Next what we're going to do is we're going to figure eight the body, just creating X wraps, creating a little bit of segmentation on our body. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Next we're going to be tying in some of our Midge Flash from Hareline. Today we're going to be using Pearl. And I don't want to use a lot. I've cut off 5 here, but today we're going to only be using 4. So once I get 4 pieces cut, I'm just going to wrap it around our thread, cinch down, tie that in. When I trim it, I want to trim it just about to the bend of the hook. And then our next step today, I'm going to be tying in some elk hair. And we're going to be using natural today. And I don't want a giant clump either. Actually using less elk hair helps just splay it a little bit better when we tie in our piece of foam. Get all the underfur out, stack it, and again I just want that elk hair to extend about to the end of our bend here. Tie this in with a couple tight wraps, work my thread forward through the elk hair, making sure it's all tied in. Trim off all the excess. And we're going to come in with our ice dub again. We're going to be using the same olive brown color. So depending on what color your squalas are, it depends on location and where you are in North America, say Pacific Northwest, here in Alberta. So we're going to tie this from the front to back, covering up all those elk hair pieces. Next we're going to be tying in a piece of 2mm foam as well. I'm going to use the same brown color, and we're just going to cut a notch into this piece of foam here. So I want this to extend about halfway to our elk hair, cinch down with a couple tight wraps. Then our next step here, we're going to be tying in a couple of rubber legs on each side. Same MFC legs. Sometimes what I'll do as well is I'll put a little drop of super glue on my thread, and as I wrap those legs, it'll actually penetrate the thread and inside the dubbing as well. Those legs aren't going anywhere. And as for indicator, I'm just going to tie a piece of 2mm foam and Chartreuse on top. I'm going to bring my thread forward to the front of our hook here. Because it's getting covered up, we can throw a little bit of thread over top. Nobody's going to see it. Cinch down our piece of 2mm foam just behind the eye of the hook. And we're going to be tying in our antennae now. And again, we're going to be using the same olive MFC Sexi-Floss. We're just going to get that tied on top. Get a couple tight wraps. Make sure it's on there nice and tight. And as I fold this indicator over top, that's going to help me cinch down those antennae, make sure they're splayed the right way I want them. Once we get a couple tight wraps onto there, we are ready for our whip finish. I'm just going to trim this, and when we trim it, I want it to be about the same length as the back of this piece of foam. Trim off our excess. Now as we trim the legs, just make sure that they're nice and even. And there you have it. That is a finished El Camino.